July 31st, 2025 will go down in history as not only one of the most pivotal days of the 2025 season, but one of the most pivotal days of the overall landscape of Major League Baseball in its entirety. That day is the day of this year's trade deadline, a day in which a flurry of trades will be made to cement teams as contenders, rebuilders, or somewhere in between. Every team, no matter what position in their division or long-term standing, has something to gain from this trade deadline. In years past, we've seen World Series runs be cemented with a player or two gone during the trade deadline. However, at the same time, we've seen future superstars get moved as desperate teams take risks in order to reach the postseason now. So, with such an important day for baseball, all crammed into such a short window for a flurry of trades to happen, I think it's important for me to showcase what a potential trade deadline may look like. And what better way to do that than to make one custom trade for each team that includes a prospect return. Hopefully, with this video, you will see some names that could be on the move come the end of July, along with potential fits and how much they would cost in terms of future capital in return. But, before we get on to the video, could you guys please hit the like and subscribe button? Currently, only 3% of people who watch my videos are subscribed, so if y'all do, not only would it help me grow my channel, but also would encourage me to create more videos like this one for you guys. And without further ado, let's get on to the video. Although we, as per usual, will be starting with the Diamondbacks because they are first in alphabetical order, I probably would have started with them anyways just because of how important they will be at dictating the entire trade deadline. Sitting at 47-50 going into the second half, the Diamondbacks have been one of the most disappointing teams of 2025. A combination of injuries, pitching regression, and untimely errors have been this team's demise. However, on paper, they are supposed to compete for National League supremacy, and they still have a couple of pieces that other teams will certainly want to make postseason pushes of their own. With many of their top performers pending free agency after this season, expect them to be very active this upcoming trade deadline, and for them to pop up multiple times in this video specifically. For this section, I'm going to find a trade for Eugenio Suarez. With 31 home runs and a 148 OPS+, the All-Star will generate a heavy market of suitors. And for the Diamondbacks, it not only makes sense to trade him in that he's on an expiring contract, but also because it opens up a spot in the infield for top prospect Jordan Lawler. In my trade, I have the D-backs sending Eugenio Suarez over to the Yankees for two lower-level pitching prospects in their system in Kyle Carr and Carlos LaGrange. For the Yankees, they do this trade because they would love a third baseman, and they don't have to part with any of their elite prospects like Spencer Jones or Cam Schlittler. And for the Diamondbacks, they get two very high upside pitching prospects to aid their long-term depth. Sitting at 16 games under 500 and also 16 games back in the division, the A's are clearly sellers. However, even with a clear denomination, it's not easy to pinpoint a player who could be traded. Their best performers are under contract for a long time and look to be cornerstones for whatever future era they may have. Meanwhile, those assets that should be tradable have not performed well. They could try to trade Luis Severino, but I doubt that anyone would want to take him in his contract. And they don't seem to be bent on trading Mason Miller. So, the only real tradable asset that I see is in the infield, where the A's could look to trade Luis Arias. While not having the greatest season offensively with a 91 OPS+, Arias represents a cheap veteran utility bat that has some pretty good peripherals. For the A's, this is more of an addition by subtraction trade, as an Arias trade would open up more playing time for some of their younger players like Max Muncy. In my trade, Luis Arias gets sent to the Giants, who would appreciate the uptick in production at second base for 24-year-old lefty Jack Choate, who has some pretty good strikeout numbers this year in the minor leagues, and could add more pitching depth for a team that desperately needs it. Similar to the Diamondbacks, the Braves have been one of baseball's biggest disappointments. However, even with the underwhelming season, I would be surprised if they make any drastic seller moves this trade deadline. Despite what some people say, I really doubt that the Braves end up moving Ronald Acuna Jr. or any other core player under multiple years of control. Nonetheless though, they still have a couple more veteran players that they could deal. Best among them is probably Marcell Ozuna, who even in a down season is still a very nice impact designated hitter bat that a lot of teams would love to have. While he does have a no-trade clause, I'm sure that he would love to compete for a championship. And what better way to do that than a trade to the Tigers, who could use some more right-handed slug for their upcoming postseason push. The Tigers would give up 23-year-old infield prospect Max Anderson in return, who's putting up some very great numbers in AA this season and can be a long-term utility piece for the Braves. Moving on to the Orioles, along with the Diamondbacks and Braves, they are in a disappointing spot, and they also have a ton of pieces to sell off, making them one of the pivotal teams to dictate this year's trade deadline. While they still have a young core, any other kind of veteran pieces on this market can go for the right price. Among them, the best piece on this market that Baltimore has to be All-Star starter Ryan O'Hearn. Ever since coming to Baltimore, all he's done is hit, and 2025 has been his best season to date with a 139 OPS+. Additionally, he's also got positional flexibility in that he can play both first base and around the outfield, so along with that elite bat, he will garner a large price even as a rental. In my trade, he gets sent to Seattle, who would love a left-handed bat of his caliber, for a package of Seattle's pitching prospects in Brandon Garcia and Teddy McGraw, who are 25 and 23 respectively, and can aid in an Orioles retool almost immediately as upper-level minors prospects. At the beginning of the month, the Red Sox were in a confusing state of neither being buyers nor sellers, and by trading Rafael Devers in that blockbuster deal to the Giants, they ended up looking like sellers. However, since then, they have won 10 straight going into the All-Star break and are now squarely within the buyers category. With one of the top emerging farm systems in the game and a fairly young roster, at least from a lineup perspective, I would like to see them make a big move to not only set them up for this year, but also give them some more long-term upside. With the rotation being the best position to improve long-term, I see them targeting Pittsburgh Pirates starter Mitch Keller in this year's trade deadline. At 29 years old, Keller is right at the apex of his career, and he's quietly been a very quality pitcher for a long time. And what's more, he's also under team control for the next 3 seasons for a fair price. So this move not only makes the Red Sox better this season, but also rounds out their rotation for the foreseeable future. The only thing is, since he's not a rental, he will cost a fair amount in prospect return. Outfield prospect Yostinson Garcia, a soon-to-be Major League ready power-hitting outfield prospect, is the main piece heading back in this deal, but the Red Sox also have to send over one more prospect in former first-rounder James Tibbs III. For the Pirates, they get a couple of nice batters to get an offense around Paul Skeens for the future, and although they have to give up a long-time productive starter, they have many other young pitchers coming over the horizon, so this is a good trade to make. If this trade deadline does end up happening, the Cubs would have to be bummed out that they couldn't get a Eugenio Suarez, as he would be a perfect fit for them at third base. However, they cannot afford to sit on their hands this deadline, as they have to capitalize on this core that they currently have. With third base, the rotation, and bullpen all in need, the Cubs could be very aggressive this deadline, and luckily, they have the farm system to do so. Starting with the bullpen, let's grab Johan Duran from the Twins to form a lethal back-end bullpen going into the postseason. With the Twins struggling, there have been talks that a couple of their big back-end arms could be on the move, and the Cubs can capitalize on that to turn a former weakness in their bullpen into a huge strength come postseason time. This will not be cheap, however, as Duran is not only one of the top relievers in all of baseball, but also has 2 more very controllable years after this one. In my trade, the Twins get a top-level infield prospect in Jefferson Rojas from the Cubs, along with an MLB-ready utility bat in Jonathan Long. Long-term, I really like this trade for both teams, since we've seen what this Cubs team is capable of with an elite closer, while at the same time, the Twins can solve both their short and long-term infield dilemma with these 2 prospects. Switching over crosstown to the White Sox, they're in a polar opposite situation to the Cubs, firmly still in rebuilding mode looking for some more pieces to ship off. They have a couple of tradable assets, and even though the one drawing the most amount of buzz is Luis Robert, I want to call to attention an under-the-radar pitcher in Adrian Houser, who has quietly been a very good pitcher for the White Sox this season and can serve a role on a playoff team as a middle rotation piece. Signed to a 1-year deal in the offseason, Houser is a rental, but at the same time will not be making anything on the scope of a major league franchise. So there are a ton of ways to get Houser at the trade deadline while still having the financial flexibility to make other moves for a contending team. Houser to the Mariners makes a lot of sense in my opinion. They could use an arm like his to round out a rotation that has been plagued by injuries and underperformance, and this is the kind of move that they can make in tandem with another one. In my trade, the Mariners send over a lower-level infield prospect that I really like in Ty Pete, who has admittedly struggled upon his promotion to High A this season, but is only 19 years old, in order to make this trade work. Meanwhile, I think that the Cincinnati Reds could be a great fit for the aforementioned Luis Robert. I called for Robert to be traded last offseason, and even though he wasn't and has since struggled mightily for the White Sox this season, looking very uninterested at times, he now exists as a tantalizing buy low star. I don't think a ton of top contenders would look to get him, as he can be a big financial risk. However, I think that the Cincinnati Reds, who have a ton of young controllable pieces on their roster anyways, could take the risk for the potential payout of grabbing a star to pair alongside Elly De La Cruz. And what's more, by bearing a lot of that financial risk by trading for Robert, the payment prospect-wise shouldn't be too much for the amount of control that they're getting. And they don't have to jeopardize that young core that they're building in order their rotation or bullpen. In my trade, outfielder Jake Fraley and outfield prospect Hector Rodriguez moved the needle to acquire Robert Jr. For the White Sox, Rodriguez is a nice power-hitting 21-year-old in Double-A, a cool prospect to add to this rebuild, while Fraley can be a bounce-back candidate for this offseason or for next year's trade deadline. For the Guardians, that 10-game losing streak has put them in an awkward spot of either selling pieces for huge value or running it back with this current core, as they are in striking distance of a wildcard spot if they get hot this second half. However, the thing I am most confident in this trade line for the Guardians is that they work to ship off some veteran pieces with expiring contracts. Lane Thomas will be an intriguing piece for a potential playoff team, as he's been great against lefties throughout his entire career and has shown up big in the postseason before. So, for a team that needs a potent bench bat in the playoffs, Thomas could change the equation for them. So even if he doesn't have the best stats this season, he still has some value, even however little it is. Lane Thomas to the Mets could be a good fit. They have a couple of lefty bats that, come playoff time, could be subbed out for Thomas when a tough lefty is on the mound. However, for the Mets, Thomas cannot be the only move for this trade deadline to be a success for them, as they have to get some other pieces. The good thing is, it won't cost too much, as in my trade, 26-year-old pitcher Dom Hamill is the only returning piece, a hopeful buy low candidate for this excellent Guardians pitching development staff. The Colorado Rockies are firmly in the sellers category. However, I question how far is this team truly willing to go for this rebuild. They've had chances to trade talents before they become untradeable, but they have consistently sat on their hands come trade deadline. Is it possible that they trade Hunter Goodman? I know it sounds crazy, but they have experienced firsthand what can happen if they end up not trading a surprising player with Nolan Jones, who saw stock fall and was shipped for a fraction of what was initially projected. For the sake of this Rockies franchise, I'm not going to trade Goodman, who is their homegrown burgeoning star. Instead, I'll shift to Jake Bird, who is having a career season and should be in many contending circles as a top-end reliever to get. I like him with the Yankees. He can fit in to fill out the back end of their bullpen and just add some more consistency there. For the Yankees, they trade pitching prospect Brock Selvage and Brendan Jones for the 29-year-old reliever, who has 3 more years left of control in their bullpen, and the Rockies can get some nice prospects in return. The Tigers, as one of the best teams in baseball this season, are obviously buyers, and in this situation, already having them grab one of the better right-handed bats on the open market in Marcell Ozuna, now pivot to address the bullpen, which has been a little shaky at times and could always use another back-end arm. I really like David Bednar here. He doesn't have to be the closer, but he has closer experience and at the end of the day is a high-leverage arm. Additionally, Bednar also has 1 more year left of control after this season, so he fits with this window a little bit more. With an ERA under 3 this season and very good strikeout numbers, Bednar solidifies this pen with a ton of back-end arms in Holton, Canely, and Will Vest. In my trade, 20-year-old infielder Frania Baramontia, as well as 26-year-old outfielder Justice Bigbie are the 2 prospects returning in this deal, giving the Pirates even more offensive pieces to work with Bigbie close to Major League ready. The Astros, sitting in first place in the American League West, will be buyers going into the trade deadline. However, the question becomes, how aggressive will this team be? Historically, they have been very aggressive at grabbing players that may help out the team, and nearing the end of their window with Altuve in their rotation, may trade the farm for another piece that can bring them over the top, and Sandy Alcantara could be that piece. Although he has struggled mightily with an ERA over 7, it was not long ago when Alcantara was a Cy Young Award winner and one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, and hopefully a change of scenery could be what would bring back Alcantara's past dominance, as he still has the stuff. The Astros could buy low on a player like Alcantara, and if he ends up panning out, then not only would it put them in a better spot this season, but also open up their window of contention for a little while longer. All for not a crazy price considering the upside Alcantara brings. In my trade, infielder Ryan Johnson, outfielder Pedro Leon, and righty Miguel Eula are the 3 players sent back to complete the trade. And although this is a lot to give up for a pretty weak farm system, for them to keep their top prospects in Matthews, Melton, and Janik has to be a huge success to acquire a player of Alcantara's caliber. The next couple of weeks for the Royals will ultimately prove crucial for what they will ultimately do at the trade deadline. Currently, they are 3 games under 500, but in an American League wildcard race that has a couple of open spots, they could very much make the postseason if they get hot at the right time. While I don't think that staying in limbo is the best move for any team, the Royals seem likely to make some small additions to see if they can try to compete. And this is where I like Nationals outfielder Alex Call as a good fit. He is by no means a star, but this season he has been quietly putting up some very good on-base numbers for Washington, and can be a huge upgrade for the Royals in their corner outfield, which has been one of the worst in the league. And what's more, he has 4 more years left of control after this season, meaning that if the Royals would like, they could extend him or trade him for profit if his value goes up. In my trade, righty Junior Marte and outfield prospect Carson Rocafort would be enough to complete the trade, and for the Nationals, they open up spots along the outfield for their young players while getting 2 decent prospects to throw in the mix. The Angels are in a similar spot to the Royals in terms of their state going into the deadline. However, in a tougher division and a tougher remaining strength of schedule, I believe that the best course of action would be for them to capitalize on an aggressive buyer's market by selling off some of their pieces, especially some with expiring contracts. Players on expiring contracts like Luis Rengifo, Tyler Anderson, Kenley Jansen, and Yohan Moncada could all get a fairly decent return back for the Angels, who can set themselves up for some sort of long-term plan for this core. I want to talk about Yoan Moncada for this segment. He has been pretty good for the Angels this year, posting an 805 OPS with 7 home runs. Playing third base, there would be a couple of teams jockeying hard to acquire his services, and I think that ultimately, the Cubs acquired the 30-year-old rental for 2 prospects in Nazier Mole and Pedro Ramirez. It's not a ton, but for a team that needs some depth prospects, this is a good start, and they are both young enough to hopefully see their stocks rise as they age. Meanwhile, the Dodgers don't have any needs, both long-term and short-term, but there are always ways in which they could become even better, and with this farm system overflowing with depth, almost any player on the market is within reach for them. This may be a stretch, but Josh Smith from the Rangers could be a perfect fit for their needs. Last year, they got Tommy Edman to play a utility role for them, and although he is still on the roster in 2025, Smith can represent the long-term play for Los Angeles as their utility man, while solving the short-term infield woes and shifting around the hot hand. Additionally, Smith also has a pretty potent offensive game, currently posting an OPS plus over 120, and with 3 more years left to control in his contract, he could be a great fit for Dodger Blue if this trade ends up working out. However, all of those factors also end up making this price pretty expensive if this trade were to go through. In order to get it done, the Dodgers would have to send over one of their burgeoning young outfield prospects in Edgardo Quintero, as well as Justin Robleski. For the Rangers, Quintero becomes a top prospect for them immediately with sky-high upside, while Robleski can immediately join the team as a major league pitching option and hopefully turn out long-term as a starter. In this trade deadline, the Marlins already traded their longtime top pitcher in Sandy Alcantara. However, if they really want to get serious about opening up a window of contention in the future, they could look to do what they did last year's trade deadline and trade another burgeoning pitcher with a couple of years of control left for more exciting and controllable young players. Edward Cabrera could do just that. This season, he has a 3.61 ERA in 16 starts, and with 3 more years left to control after this one, the now 27-year-old could be one of the most expensive starters on the open market. There are a couple of teams that could be in play for Cabrera, and I think that the Blue Jays could be a good fit for them if they pony up for the right price, as they could use some more arms that have historically showcased a willingness to do a trade like this, trading for Jose Barrios in years past. The Blue Jays don't have the best farm system, but a trio of hitting prospects in Aurelvis Martinez, Josh Kasevich, and Charles McAdoo could prove to be a package similar to the ones the Marlins accepted for Rogers, and give them more major league viable offensive pieces. Moving on, the Brewers now are one of these teams expected to be heavily in the Eugenio Suarez sweepstakes, and even though I expect them to lose, that doesn't mean that I don't expect them to not be active during this year's trade deadline. I would love to circle back on a player that I saw as a pretty good fit during the offseason and repropose it again in a potential trade for Ryan McMahon. Unlike Caleb Durbin, their current third baseman, McMahon provides some pop with 13 home runs on the season, and as a power-hitting lefty, he better flushes out the lineup, and while providing great defense at third base as well. His average stats aren't the same as usual, maybe because he's playing under Encourage on the Rockies, so he remains an intriguing buy low piece for the Brewers, who fills a current need while also providing some future value as well. In my trade, Ryan McMahon, plus some cash to offset the future financial burden on his contract, is sent to the Brewers for Juan Baez and Manuel Rodriguez, 2 lower-level prospects for the Rockies. At this deadline, the Twins have already traded their closer in Johan Duran, and with Buxton not looking to be traded and the Twins clearly in selling mode, another piece that they could look to be moving on from it could be Griffin Jax, who would draw a large amount of suitors as another top-end bullpen piece. However, I think that not only are the Dodgers the best fit to acquire Jax, as their bullpen has been a little bit shaky and they could use another righty, but I also think that the Dodgers are also the team that has the most to offer if they really want him. He'll be an expensive piece to acquire. Not only is he one of the better setup men in all of baseball, but he also has 2 more years left to control after this one. And for the Dodgers, who desperately need a right-handed setup man and are not shy in committing resources to the bullpen, they need to make this work. In my trade, I have a top young infield prospect in Yoendry Vargas heading back to the Twins in this deal, along with Jackson Ferris to help this Twins pitching staff right now. It's a lot for the Dodgers admittedly, but Jax helps out their postseason chase right now more than Ferris and Vargas could at the moment, and for the Dodgers in their current situation, that's all they need to hear. The New York Mets have shown some interest in starting pitching as we gear up towards the trade deadline, and although they look fine with some starters coming back from the IL, they could always shoot for some more high upside plays to better themselves for the postseason. And this is where I think Zach Gallen could be a perfect fit for them. Gallen has admittedly struggled this season. His walks are up and he's allowing a ton of hard contact, but it wasn't that long ago when he was considered an ace for the D-backs. With him having a good track record pitching in New York, the Mets could re-unlock another ace to add to their rotation, which would be absolutely huge come playoff time. And furthermore, as a rental, he won't even cost that much, so it's a lower risk, high upside play that the Mets have the luxury to make and shouldn't pass on. If I'm the Mets, I would get this done by sending over a 23-year-old starter in Jack Winiger and infielder Colin Howick. And if I'm the D-backs, I'm happy I'm getting some nice controllable pieces in the high swing and miss Winiger and the former first rounder in Howick. For the New York Yankees, we already have them grab a third baseman in Eugenio Suarez as well as a relief pitcher in Jake Bird. However, there's one more position that the Yankees have not addressed yet, and that is starting pitching. After losing Clark Schmidt to injury, the Yankees could use another starter for the final half of the season. With Rodon and Fried, the Yankees don't have to go all out to acquire a third starter, and I think that Jeffrey Springs, even though he would be another lefty in this pitching rotation, could be the type of pitcher that the Yankees could add on a budget after splurging on Suarez and Bird. Springs has 2 more years left of control after this one, but the financial assets, while potentially proving burdensome for the A's, could be no trouble for the Yankees. As a result, the Yankees could get a quality middle-of-the-rotation starter for the next couple of years with almost no downside. With the finances, in terms of prospect return, it's not a ton. I would swap Springs to the Yankees for pitching prospect Griffin Herring, who is having a terrific season in AA, and infield prospect Jesus Rodriguez, getting rid of some depth prospects for a better chance to compete this season and for the next couple of years in the rotation. With Jose Alvarado's suspension and Jordan Romano struggling, the bullpen has to be one of the biggest targets for the Phillies. They could go after some of the lower tier of relief pitching options like Shelby Miller or Raisel Iglesias, but with an aging core, I think that they go aggressive and get one of the best relief pitchers that has a chance of being traded in Emmanuel Clase. Although Clase has taken a step back from his amazing 2024 season, when he's on, he's dominant, and he can be the deciding factor in a postseason series if he's used properly. With 1 more year left of control after this one, plus 2 more on a club option, he perfectly fits the rest of this Phillies window, and can be traded on a bounce-back season in the future if this Phillies collapse happens sooner than expected. However, as for now, a player of his caliber will cost a good amount in terms of return, as one of the most lethal weapons in any bullpen. Catcher Eduardo Tait headlines the return, as a potential elite-level catching prospect in just about a year's time. Additionally, Moises Chase, one of the Phillies' top pitching prospects, and Toolsy outfield prospect Griffin Burkholder also headlined the return. While all in the lower levels of the minor leagues, they could return huge dividends in the long run if these guys end up panning out. The Pirates have done much of the heavy lifting in this trade deadline scenario, trading away Mitch Keller and David Bednar. And no, I do not think it would be wise to trade Paul Skeens as well. Almost regardless of what kind of return offer it can bring in terms of a fan base, trading Paul Skeens can do irreparable damage to the psyche of a fan, and that kind of loss can negatively impact the Pirates, even when they eventually become good. So, with Skeens not a trade option, one of the only other players I could see the Pirates trading would be Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who's having a sneaky good season as the club's shortstop and could be one of the better rental players on the move. The Brewers, in my opinion, need a shortstop badly, and with the market for that position being fairly poor, IKF could be that subtle move that makes the team a lot better, while still giving the young guys a chance to improve themselves for the Brewers. It is an interdivision trade, but it is small enough for it to not really matter in terms of the fan bases. In my trade, the Pirates trade him to the Brewers for 18-year-old lottery ticket type prospect and Jose Anderson, an outfielder with good power who could pan out into a top prospect if he continues to mature in his contact abilities. The Padres have a history of being very aggressive during the trade deadline, and with some major holes on this roster, they are once again in a position to do just that. This season, acquiring a catcher will be paramount for them to make the playoffs in the loaded National League, and for them to do damage once there as well. I know I said that the Braves would try not to trade any player with multiple years of control left on their contract, but the addition of Drake Baldwin kind of changes things. Long term, if the Braves do trade Sean Murphy, then I think that Drake Baldwin can move in as a starting catcher and provide similar production there, at least offensively at least. However, in order for the Braves to want to trade their all-star catcher with 4 more years left of control on his contract, a serious offer must be propped up for it to happen. 2024 first-rounder Cash Mayfield, an elite relief pitcher in Jeremiah Estrada, and Henry Baez is the return package for this deal. Estrada helps with their bullpen woes, while Mayfield and Baez assist in a farm system that is one of the worst in baseball. While the Padres hold on to their 2 top prospects in Ethan Salas and Leo Dallas de Vries, while still getting the better catchers in all of baseball when healthy, setting themselves up for success this year and for the next couple of years as well. The Mariners are another one of these teams that has to be bummed out that they couldn't get a Eugenio Suarez, reuniting him with a fan base that fell in love with him just a couple of years prior. However, they did get a nice left-handed bat of their own in Ryan O'Hearn in this hypothetical, as well as another starting pitcher in Adrian Hauser, and they still have the farm system to be very aggressive in terms of any other player they may like. While third base is a need, I could see them grabbing another power late inning reliever to pair alongside Andres Munoz. And this could be where Dennis Santana, a controllable right-handed pitcher having the best season of his career, could be a good fit for Seattle. For the Mariners, they send over Jeter Martinez and Tyler Locklear to complete this trade, with Locklear being a great fit for the Pirates as some nice Major League ready hitting. Even though the Giants have already made one of the biggest trades of the year so far, trading for superstar Rafael Devers, they are still in need of some more bats if they wish to make the playoffs. In this case, Carlos Santana could be that low-key add that the Giants want to make, considering that their farm system may be reeling after the Devers trade. Santana could play first base or DH, intertwining with Devers, and while that does leave Wilmer Flores out, he can serve as a veteran bench bat until he gets on a hot streak again like he did at the beginning of the season. Santana plays great defense at first base too, so while the bat isn't amazing, he could help Devers assimilate to the position better, and all for little cost being a rental. In my trade, the Guardians would send over Carson Seymour, another pitcher that the Guardians would love to have, as he has great stuff but just needs to put it all together. The Cardinals will be one of the more interesting teams to watch going into the trade deadline. Sitting at 5 games over 500, they are right in the mix of it in terms of competing for a wildcard spot in the National League. However, the plan this season was likely more of a retool year, and they probably had plans to ship off some expiring pieces before the season for more controllable assets. Therefore, I could see more of a hybrid approach, in which pieces are both shipped off and bought, and out of the players who could be shipped off, the most likely of them to be traded is all-star closer Ryan Helsley, who is on the last year of his contract. Helsley would be super sought after on the market as one of the best closers in all of baseball. Even though he's taken a step back in 2025, he could be a force for any bullpen down the stretch run. And with other teams already grabbing some elite level closers as the Phillies, Cubs, or Tigers have already gotten some, I think one potential fit could be the Boston Red Sox, who could form an elite, high velocity duo of Helsley and Chapman for the rest of this season. With a top farm system in the game, the Red Sox could afford to make this trade happen too. In my trade, they send over 6'7", 24-year-old starter Blake Wehunt, and 22-year-old outfield prospect Zach Earhart, who have both been having excellent seasons moving up to Double-A and had many more years of control for the half season of Helsley. With the Rays' current losing streak, including getting swept in a 4-game series to a division rival and wildcard competitor Red Sox, this could solidify themselves as sellers come the 2025 trade deadline. However, they are another team in which the next 2 weeks following the break could play a very crucial role in what they ultimately decide to do. However, assuming that the momentum carries over and the Rays ultimately decide to do a soft sell, I think that one player that could be traded could be lefty starter Zach Littell, who is on the last year of his contract and has been putting up some very good numbers in 2025. For a playoff team, Littell can slot in as a middle rotation starter down the stretch, and for the Tigers, whose rotation has been battered with injuries, this could be a good get for the short term. In my trade, former third-rounder Josh Randell is sent over for Littell. And while Randell hasn't been jaw-dropping this season for the Tigers, the Rays are just happy to grab so many extra years of pitching control for the half season of Littell. Unless something crazy happens, I don't think that the Rangers will be huge sellers come the 2025 trade deadline. Even though they have pieces that would be heavily coveted on the open market like DeGrom, Eovaldi, or Adolis Garcia, sitting at just a game under 500, I think that they're actually more inclined to be small buyers who hope to get hot at the right time and sneak into the playoffs, where anything can happen. As a result, I think that one move that could help out the team immensely could be trading for Josh Naylor, which would add much needed offensive prowess and slug to a position that they've struggled mightily in first base. While Naylor's power numbers are down from this 2024 season where he hit 31 home runs, he has seen his contact numbers rise, and may be one of the better hitting options that the Rangers could target on the open market. As a rental, his price isn't exuberant either. In my trade, the Rangers send over a trio of pitchers in Josh Stefan, Mark Church, and Skylar Hales. While none of them are star prospects and have struggled in giving up runs this season in the minor leagues, they are all in the upper levels of the minor leagues, giving the D-backs a ton of longer-term pitching depth. Don't look now, but the Blue Jays are first in the American League East and are expected to be very aggressive this upcoming trade deadline. Already had them trade for Edward Cabrera, giving them a long-term middle to top-end starter, but I think that they could fill out the rotation even more by grabbing D-backs Merrill Kelly to further solidify this pitching staff. Although he is on the last year of his contract, Kelly has been nothing short of consistent throughout the latter half of his D-backs career. This season has been no different, posting a 3.34 ERA in 20 starts. For the Blue Jays, grabbing Kelly further lengthens out this rotation, and also solidifies them better for the playoffs, where Kelly has pitching experience there. In my trade, given how a ton of the farm was used to get Cabrera, I would focus more on this trade and young depth outfielder Joey Loperfido, and third base prospect Sean Keyes to get this trade done. However, to have a rotation stretch out like this is more than worth it in my opinion at least. And lastly, we have the Nationals, who have had a pretty disappointing season up to this point, and will look to see if they can trade any veterans on expiring contracts to gear themselves up for a better sustained run in the future. There's not a ton to trade, but I think that their closer in Kyle Finnegan can be a lot of help to other teams. He may not be the closer, as his strikeout numbers haven't been great this season, but it helps that he has closer experience and can be a back-end quality arm for a playoff team. And this is where I want to head back to Toronto to make another trade. The rotation has been strengthened a lot, but the bullpen could use a little bit more of a boost with Hoffman struggling this season. Adding Finnegan with closer experience just adds so much more insurance for relatively little cost. As in my trade, the Blue Jays send over a 20-year-old second base prospect Sam Shaw to complete the trade. At only 20 years old, Shaw is putting up some good numbers in Single-A, so if he can continue this production against higher level competition, he could see his stock for the Nationals rise. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below any video ideas. If you'd like me to make any other videos on the trade deadline, let me know in the comments down below. Or if you would like me to make any videos after the trade deadline, maybe trade deadline grades, winners and losers, and a farm system rankings after the trade deadline, let me know in the comments down below. And without further ado, I will see you guys all in the next one. God bless.